How's
I
it going?
Yeah, how's it going? I missed the webinar from yesterday because it was my daughter's 25th birthday, and we had a freaking girls' day. Went out to dinner, so I didn't get to what I did catch like towards the end because I had to go in there and ask a question because I was reading the YouTube comment
Oh,
on there.
yeah, yeah,
Wow!
yeah.
So I
I
came
mean,
in very last minute and asked a question.
and it's the same question or the same thing that I keep seeing
Yeah.
everywhere, and it's like, I don't know. But yeah, I mean, I was spending time with my family because I was gone for a week with my mom taking care of her. So family comes first,
Yeah.
like we always say, and so we were family timing it up yesterday.
Yes, we were.
We deserve it, damn it.
But yeah, and it's like you can tell who's being told information because the question that I asked was, does kratom fall under the precursor laws? The Precursor Act stuff.
Yeah.
And it doesn't. But
That's what people keep saying. Oh, it's the all of kratom's gonna be banned because of the Analog Act, and it's a precursor,
yeah,
and
so that's they're trying to incite fear in you guys and you 708ers. So
yeah.
knock that
Well,
shit.
even in kratom advocates, I think in general, that's the ultimate goal is to incite fear in all of kratom advocates so that we get upset and we do something about it.
And we go
When
help them advocate.
Right, and it's like, "Bro, y'all done fucked our plant's name up. We
Yeah.
don't have nothing. I don't have nothing to do, no
No.
help to give."
Mm-mm. And
"Oh, super fun time. What up?"
hey, what's up? Yo, yo, yo. And it's like, if kratom does come up on the chopping block federally or just in general, we're going to do what we always do.
Exactly.
We advocate.
But it's like, you can't sit there and tell me that something's gonna happen. Nobody knows at the end of the day, none of us knows what's gonna happen. But right now, the best step forward is the way that we're going,
Mm-hmm.
I feel.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's not gonna be the first mistake I made. But I will bust my ass to advocate and make
Yeah.
sure it doesn't happen. But it's like
We,
sitting there and helping the very thing that destroyed the kratom name?
yeah.
Not me.
No. No.
Nope.
And I'm not going to apologize for it at all.
No. No.
And whenever we're talking about it and you think that we're specifically talking about you, then I guess the shoe fit. But
Yeah.
we're not specifically talking about anybody that consumes 708.
No. We're talking about 70H, the actual
Substance.
70H products that are on the molested molecule.
Molested molecules. Yeah.
Oh, it's like, and if you're shit talking in our comments or if the shoe fits, wear it. But like,
Yeah.
we're not talking about anybody specifically.
I ain't going to give you my other shoe. I'll save kratom for you, when 708 is federally banned.
Yep. Dude,
You.
I I know I feel this because like the last time we got hot wings from I think it was oh, what is that place? I want to call it Wet Wild Wings. That's not it. Buffalo. I don't know what.
Buffalo.
I,
Buffalo Wild Wings.
yeah, man, their hot is for real so hot.
It
Like
is.
I was even drinking milk, and I was told my husband, like, dude, I will never eat the hot again.
Yeah.
It's too hot. Yeah.
He accidentally bumped his face and mouth. I can see you over there freaking out.
I'm doing ranch and celery and everything, trying to douse the flames, man. Too hot's no good.
It is not. It
Oh,
when it overwhelms it like that, it just takes away from the chicken wing
you can't
experience.
enjoy it. Like you're too worried about putting the fire out.
Yeah. And then you're just, unintentionally getting high because it caused you to do all these other extra things, you
Oh
know?
man. Oh yeah, I feel that because I think that's the last time I ate wild or wings. Maybe.
How was the booty hole today, Super Fun Quizon?
How was your morning constitutional?
What goes in must come out the same way.
Oh man.
I'm over
Oh,
here drinking sparkling water because we went on a little shopping spree yesterday for my daughter's birthday, and this Saratoga sparkling water. I fell in love with sparkling water, dude. When I went to the Kratom Symposium in Florida, whenever they put out the tables for like our snacks or what have you,
yeah.
there was all this fancy ass sparkling water. I was like, oh my god, this shit tastes good.
I've actually got some of that. I haven't used it. I got it for like pumpkin. It's like 3-ingredient pumpkin rolls. It's like all-purpose flour or self-rising flour, that stuff, and then pumpkin.
Oh, to make it?
Yeah, to make pumpkin rolls. And
Oh.
yeah, so
And that time of season's almost here.
I know.
Mm-hmm.
He said, "Oh God." Oh, I hope you got you a bidet is all I know to say, because my husband swears by his.
My daughter swears by hers.
Yeah, like even when we leave the house and we have to go out of town, he's just miserable. He just loves his bidet so much.
I still have yet to go try it.
I don't care for it. It's too much for me. It's way too much for me. All right, so let's see what Mac Daddy has to say last night. I know it'll be great.
Yeah, gotta be. Okay. Here we go. Oh, damn it, I muted it.
When she looked at it and she started doing her own research, and she raised the red flag, blew the whistle, and said, wait a minute, what are we doing working with this group when what I'm reading it's highly
Did he just
controversial?
start late or something?
And so she reached out and
he played
obviously
that Moms from America thing.
Oh.
And so he said there was like a little bit of technical issues. He was trying to figure out how he was going to play it before it started.
Oh. Dude, did you go watch some of this last night?
I watched like the very first of it, and then I watched I saw when he asked your question.
Oh.
Because I was like about to leave. We were about to go to Walgreens. I was like, oh, he just
I think he said, well, I guess we'll find out. But, because I was talking about my daughter's birthday. Why I missed the webinar because my daughter's birthday. And I'm pretty sure he said, congratulations.
Yeah.
On your daughter's birthday.
Okay, so it did start mid-sentence. Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
I hit play again.
NOH program. And that was fascinating when she looked at it and she started doing her own research.
Oh, let me take the
and
captions off.
Raised the red flag, blew the whistle, and said, wait a minute, what are we doing working with this group when what I'm reading it's highly controversial? And so she reached out, and we now have obviously an ally with this very powerful lobbying voice and advocacy voice for mothers protecting their children in the form of Kimberly Fletcher. She's absolutely phenomenal. She has agreed to work with us at the National Conference of Legislatures meeting, which is coming up at the end of this month. And she also is going to be helping.
Is it on the settings? You'd think I'd know because I turn them on a lot.
Annotations.
What the hell?
Sleep timer, playback speed quality.
There's usually like a CC thing in a box.
Right. That's why let me see. What's this? Oh, that's the chat.
Oh, okay. Wait, it says closed captions unavailable. How is it on yours?
What is happening?
If I go to it on my YouTube, it says closed caption unavailable. So you must have it turned on somewhere else.
Well, I guess we're dealing with it.
Yeah, we can deal with it. Let's roll with this flow.
Roll with the punches.
Us on the planned event, which is leading into my advertisement on September 13th through 15th, we will reenact and recognize the 10th anniversary of the rally that was held outside of the White House on September 13th, 2016. And of course, it'll be the 10th year anniversary. Unfortunately, we cannot secure a permit, which, by the way, we didn't have anyway in 2016. That was a little bit of a mess. But we are able to, we've applied for a permit at a park very close to the White House because the Lafayette Park is closed down because of construction that's ongoing at the White House right now. So on Sunday, the 13th, in mid-afternoon, sometime around 3 o'clock, and we're firming up all the details, depending on whatever unknown restrictions we might have for the permit, we're going to have a rally, and we're going to recognize this magnificent advocacy effort that got started on that day in order to protect the leaf. And that will be a nostalgic event, but it's also a significant historical event for the Kratom community. We then will follow that with a series of meetings on Monday and Tuesday. We're working on the planning. We are pushing hard in order to get a commitment out of various agencies and members to host some meetings with us. So we're looking at working with the executive branch and the Congress in order to promote the message that now has been catapulted. I'm sorry, I got a false bridge or false tooth in my mouth. It's giving me a hard time talking while they get an implant. I had a grandson that headbutted me and knocked my tooth out. But it will be a great opportunity for us to recognize all that happened. So that 3-day period, what we're asking the Kratom community to do is to reach out to your networks, to your friends, to your social network, your families, and try to get them to sponsor you to come and participate in this really historic event. We want to focus on veterans. That clearly there is a real draw on the experiences that veterans have with Kratom, and there's a hunger for knowledge about that both in the executive branch and on the Capitol Hill. So we're asking the vendors that traditionally help with all of our advocates to sponsor them to come to DC for some of these meetings that we have. We're asking them to focus on veterans. And so it's going to take a little bit of community here for us to figure out exactly how that's all going to work. So put that on your calendars. Again, September 13th through 15th, starting about 3 in the afternoon, gives you time to get in on Sunday morning. And we will conclude with a reception on late Tuesday afternoon. So for planning purposes, you can take off on Wednesday morning. So that's the plan. We're excited about this event. It's going to give us a chance to recognize some true heroes in the Kratom movement that were there 10 years ago and really got this thing kicked off. And so it will be a fabulous reunion for many, and it will be a great opportunity for everyone to participate in what is truly a significant event. And it's magnificent that it happens to come here just a few months before what happened this week in terms of this past week in terms of the decision by the Drug Enforcement Administration to issue a temporary scheduling order on 7-OH and the follow-on synthetics. So I want to talk about that for a couple of minutes, because this is confusing, and I know it's confusing. I'm going to try to sell it or explain it or to just give it some kind of texture as best I can, because a couple of things have been misinterpreted. I've seen it on the social media platforms, including the 7-OH people, and I think some of it is being deliberately mischaracterized. So here's the fact. Under the Controlled Substances Act, there are two options that the Drug Enforcement Administration has on any substance that is recommended by the FDA or HHS or any individual that wants to make a recommendation, all of which have to be vetted by FDA, of course, but anybody can make the recommendation. An individual citizen can. But that's where we are in terms of the FDA and HHS jointly, as everyone remembers, back on July 29th of 2025, where they sent over the recommendation for scheduling of 7-OH. In the intervening time, and it took an extraordinary amount of time, because back in 2016, the recommendation was made in March, and they had it up and running on August 31st. So the reason it took so long is because of the complexity of getting the data that's necessary, that required under the Controlled Substances Act for the 8 factors. So in this particular case, when you do temporary scheduling, you are required to do 3 factors of the 8, and those 3 factors focused on the addiction liability and the safety of the product that's on the market. And so in this particular case, temporary scheduling, 3 factors were evaluated, and the DEA decided that they were going to split them into 2 separate temporary scheduling orders. The first is for 7-OH, and they thought that they were distinctly different because of the structure of these chemical compounds. And so because one is natural, and then they take the natural leaves and they obviously chemically manipulate them to create a 7-OH opioid. The second temporary scheduling was for the chemically not manipulated but created substances, which includes the pseudodoxil and includes MGM 15 and 16. There it takes a specific chemical reaction in order to develop what does not naturally occur at the levels at which they're producing them in their finished products in the natural leaf. And specifically for MGM 15 and 16, there's an argument that it has no genetic link whatever to metrogeny. So 2 separate temporary orders, meaning that they will be in effect for 2 years. And then during that 2-year period, the Drug Enforcement Administration can do one of 2 things. So it's sort of a cascading thing. They can conclude the 8-factor analysis and go for permanent scheduling at that point, so 2 years from now. Or secondly, they could take another year. So they can officially publish in the Federal Register that they're adding another year to the evaluation. The idea is that they will have developed the comprehensive database on all of the safety data and the addiction data that would help them to be able to meet the obligation. And this is an important distinction, and I know, again, it adds to the confusion. During the temporary scheduling order, there is no judicial review, and there is no public comment period on the orders that were issued, the 2 orders that the DEA issued. And that's good, was complicated by what HHS did, but levels. So they're looking for scientific input. They are not looking for public comments, whether you're for or against the substances being scheduled. That ship sailed. The temporary scheduling order is going to be in place. The only question would be any scientific data that would prompt a refinement of the actual levels that are contained in the rule. That then might require a little bit of evaluation period by the DEA to determine whether any of the scientific data was gathered by the Assistant Secretary for Health that would implicate what the level should be in the planned orders. So we typically would see in 30 days the scheduling go into effect. There might be a delay on the pseudodoxil in MGM 15 and 16 to see if the levels are right. There might be an equivalent issue with respect to the order on the metrogenine, synthetically derived metrogenine in the 7-OH. So that's the lay of the land. Anyone who tells you that, oh, there's going to be, there's a way to undo this with comments. We can get 50,000 comments. That's not going to make a difference. It's if you had 50,000 independent scientists, which we know is not true, that would give input on what the specific levels should be based on scientific evidence, then they would be considered. But it's not going to be what the Seven Hope Alliance and the Heart Group are trying to make it into, trying to gin up people that are really running a fool's errand. If the Controlled Substances Act requirements that requires the 8-factor analysis, in this case 3 factors, for the addiction liability and the safety, the imminent threat to the safety of the American people, whether that holds up. So that's all that they're allowed to do, and that is not subject to judicial review. It is not subject to public comment on whether or not you're for or against it. So just that's the clarification on that. Now, the reality is, under the Federal Controlled Substances Act, and this is unfortunate, the designation of 7-OH, chemically manipulated opioids, and MGM 15 and 16 and metrogynine pseudodoxil chemically manipulated makes any person who possesses those substances subject to a felony conviction. That's what the Controlled Substances Act does. It is not a position that the American Kratom Association favors. We think that the specific requirements and the enforcement on all of these products that are designated as being controlled substances under Schedule 1 should only apply to manufacturers, distributors, and retail outlets, because we don't think that the individual consumer should be subject to that kind of onerous penalty. We will seek in our upcoming filing of our Federal Consumer Protection Act, which we were waiting for this decision to be made, we'll try to gain some relief on that provision of the Controlled Substances Act as it applies to these two substances that are now classified as Schedule 1 or will shortly be classified under the proposed orders. It's not a great situation, and we get that. It's just the circumstance that we find ourselves in because the Controlled Substances Act is designed to take these drugs off the street when they're designated as Schedule 1. And that's a fact. And I know that there is a substantial controversy in the community. I have gotten dozens of horrific letters of people who are upset and therefore think that they have the right to threaten or to curse at me and say what an awful job that the AK has done and look what it's wrought upon our heads. That is misplaced because the group that's responsible for the current situation on the scheduling orders are none other than the manufacturers of these 7-OH products. They're the ones who brought the products to market without the required scientific evidence that's embedded in the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act and the DSHEA Act, the Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act, which says that prior to market entry, before you go on the market, you have to have a reasonable basis of safety, meaning scientific evidence that you will not cause harm, and you have to do it based on the conditions of use, meaning labeling and serving sizes. So when asked about this by me, when the Heart Group first came to us and said, we want to work together with you guys, we want to make sure the consumers are protected, let's do this. The two conditions that we set in signing an agreement with the 7-OH manufacturers was, one, they would not call their products Kratom, which they pledged they would not do. And we all know, everyone knows, that they lied because 2 months later, they were still doing it. But more importantly, the second criteria was you certify to us that you have the required safety data based on scientific evidence and data that allows you to enter the marketplace under the serving sizes that you designate because you've proven it with science. And when their chief scientific officer stood before an AKA leadership summit in Miami of 2024, or 25, I'm sorry, he admitted they had no science. They hoped that they were going to be able to conduct some science. They thought that they could get it done in 2025, but certainly in 2026. So in other words, when they sat and looked me in the eye and signed on the dotted line on an agreement, they lied on both counts. They misrepresented what the truth of the matter was, and it was exposed by their chief scientific officer. And then in a recent news interview, when Vince Sanders, who is the lead supporter of Heart, was asked the question by the reporter saying, is it true that you didn't have any scientific evidence? And he admitted, he said, no, we didn't. Of course, that was easy because his own scientific officer said there wasn't. And he said, but we are allowing the consumer evidence based on purchases of our products and the lack of adverse events to be our safety data. First, that's illegal. Second, you cannot justify under any scheme that you would use the consumers of your product as guinea pigs. And today they try to tout the fact in their view that, Kratom, the 7-OH hasn't killed anyone. And that's contradicted by the evidence and data gathered by the FDA, affirmed by HHS, and now, based on the evaluation of DEA, confirming it. They have significant evidence of addiction liability and deaths. Now, there is an argument, and it's one I'm very familiar with, that when someone dies and they have 7-OH in their system, they may also have some other opioid products. Understood. The distinction between natural kratom, where there is evidence of a tox screen that tests positive for kratom, but was not the cause of the death. The 7-OH people are trying to steal that same argument. The same way that they tried to say that 7-OH is kratom. They still say it's natural kratom. It is a bald-faced lie. They know it, but they're doing it in order to desperately hold on to the market share of the people that were deceived along the way. And those letters that I'm getting are heart-wrenching. Don't you know what this is going to do to me? I'm on 7-OH. I can't get off of it, but it's helping me with my pain. And they go on. And I understand it. I hear it loud and clear. But what we do not do at the American Kratom Association is support the ability of someone to walk out of their home, because in this country, at our 250th anniversary, we do not have the God-given right to walk down to the street corner and buy an opioid from a drug dealer, because that drug dealer hasn't cleared that product for market. And the idea that the heart people or the 7 Hope Alliance people want us to do the same thing, it's absurd. And it doesn't meet the standard for reasonableness, and it certainly doesn't meet the criteria required for the safety data that's there. I will hear people say that represent 7 Hope Alliance, Michelle Ross is an example, that the reason that they can make the claim that metrogene, 7-OH, are the same is because metrogene converts to 7-OH in the human body after ingestion as your liver processes it. That is true. What Ms. Ross does not disclose, and she should, is that the metabolism of metrogene into 7-OH that occurs in the human body after the ingestion of a kratom product is so slow that it never gets in your blood plasma levels on all the testing that's been done, never gets to a level that the average 7-OH product, and I mean average by 7.5 milligrams, and now we got products that are 6-7 times that. And this is the interesting part. They want to have that argument. They have to say that argument. But do you know what the product formulations are today? You look at the DEA scheduling notice where they identify what the product formulations that are prevalent in the marketplace today for 7-OH products. 60-some% of them are chewable tablets, and they're sublingual strips, and they're designed, engineered specifically to bypass your gut. And so if they want to make the argument, and they do, if they want to say that it's the same thing because metrogene converts into 7-OH, then why have they shifted their product formulations to, in the majority, be those products that bypass your gut and go directly to your bloodstream, except for one thing? And it's a powerful statement. It was made by a couple of the vendors at booths at the Champ Show in Las Vegas when I asked, what's the difference between kratom and 7-OH? And there were two of them, of the three that I talked to, said that 7-OH will knock you on your ass. That's their words. So I don't think that there's a legitimate basis for marketing for someone to say, oh, take 7-OH because it's the same as kratom. No, it is not. And for them to have said that is flatly wrong. And it is a lesson that Vince Sanders learned when the Attorney General of the state of Missouri landed on him for a charge of deceptive practices in marketing. And it's a strong law. And he had to sign an agreement that he would no longer manufacture or sell his 7-OH products in the state of Missouri. Too bad, sadly, that it's just one state. But more is coming. Obviously, you saw that the state of Florida, where there were people in the 7-OH advocacy community and sympathizers with 7-OH, and I think there's a distinction. I know that there are people in the kratom community that are sort of these people that say, oh, let's let everybody make their own choices. They know what 7-OH is. Let's let them decide. And by the way, these sympathizers, and I'll call them out, many of them, they're centered in the Kratom Gals podcast. They were saying this. They're saying we don't use, some of them were saying we don't use 7-OH personally. We just don't think we should dictate what they're taking, with ignoring the fact that 7-OH was dragging the kratom consumers into the abyss, where there would be bans on all kratom, and we've already seen it because state legislatures, up until the decision by the DEA, couldn't tell the difference. And we have bans today in Tennessee, where the Tennessee Bureau of Investigations officer sat at the witness table and told the legislature he couldn't tell the difference. And he didn't listen to me, wouldn't believe me. He just said it. And it's because, it's because of the 7-OH community peddling their nonsense. But we have bans today in Connecticut. We have bans today in Kansas. We have bans today, although it's been postponed, in Kentucky, all because they were blending these things together. And for Madeline Sklar, and she's going to have a whole nother podcast again saying how I'm picking on her, to sit up there and say with a straight face, oh, we don't think that we should take it away, we're not advocating for it, when she has people on her podcast who do use it, who do advocate for it, one who works for a 7-OH company. And then they want with a straight face to try to act like, it's a terrible thing. I tried to get on and comment on their podcast last week while they were saying, we want everyone to come to the table and be a part of the discussion. That's what they said. I was commenting on their chat board, and they were recognizing it, saying, oh, Mac Haddow's here, and thank goodness he came on and criticized this because it's elevated our viewership. I want everyone in the kratom community to go and listen to the nonsense that they're peddling, because, and then I started, obviously giving comments. They wouldn't let me join as a panelist. They've refused to do that. They won't come on a webinar like we're having tonight, which I've invited them to do. They won't do any of that, but they then blocked me. Madeline Sklar blocked me, and I screenshotted it, Marilyn, so don't try to say you didn't, blocked me from making comments, while her group of panelists were saying, oh, we want everyone to have a viewpoint. They have them be heard. We want everyone to be here. This is a joke. And yet the apologists for the 7-OH community have brought severe damage to the ability of consumers of natural kratom leaf products to have access to safely formulated, properly labeled, and age-gated products. And we know that those bans that are in place, or partial bans that are in place, because of the 7-OH community, because of the profiteering that was going on, and yet I'll say it, there's no defense, none. And they'll whine and cry over there at the 7-OH gals or Kratom Gals podcast. Let them. But we have to stand up for the principle that's involved here. I think it's very important. But there are others out there in the community too. If you look at any of these, or a lot of these Facebook chat boards, I mean, it's amazing to see how disconnected from reality many of these people are, because they want to advocate for a free and open drug culture that allows for anyone to take anything that they want, and they don't care about the carnage that's involved with this process. So this is something that really is going to take a concerted effort. It's going to be painful for some that were previously in the kratom community, that were in for a time in the 7-OH community, to find a pathway back. Some of them, because they are on opioids, are going to have to go through detox procedures. And the blame is not, as much as some people want to make it, the AKA advocating for scheduling of 7-OH. The responsibility is completely and totally on the shoulders of those profiteers in the 7-OH manufacturing industry that decided they did not care about the safety of the kratom consumers in our community. And we're going to continue to fight for it. And a pox on the head of anybody that tries to play this silly game that, oh, it's okay, we're not advocating for kratom, we just want people to have the freedom to do it. And I'll say it again, do we let people have the freedom to go down on the street corner and buy a lethal dose of fentanyl? Is that what we're about? Is that, and I hope Madeline answers that question, because she should, because that's her bottom line. Oh, let's let people live and let live. No, we stand up for the product safety, and we've always done it. I had a reporter ask me today that when is it that the AKA recognized the threat that 7-OH posed to consumers? Now, this is an important question, because we know now, despite having been a little bit duped early on, that instead of it being 2025 or 2023 when it came on the market, which is what everyone thought, September 2023, it actually came on the market in 2021. But the question was, when did the AKA stand up for the consumers? Because that's the latest talking point by the 7-OH community, that we just did this because we were ticked off at the 7-OH community for stealing market share. Couple things to respond to that. I don't sell Kratom. The AKA does not sell Kratom. We fight for access by consumers to safely formulated, properly labeled, age-gated products. That's what we do. And a 7-OH product is not a safely formulated product. And if you look at the labeling and the evidence that's been done by a lot of the tests that have been done, including by AKA, where we sent it off to an independent lab, and we're seeing that they falsely labeled many of their 7-OH products and their pseudodoxil products. So the reality is today that there is no space for someone saying, oh, let's let the 7-OH people do what they want to do, because it's helping people with pain. There are alternatives out there. They're going to have to find them. I know it's complex. I know that it's driving people to a serious frustration level. But if you blame anyone, blame the 7-OH people. So back to the reporter's question. When did the AKA recognize it? Because again, the 7-HOPE Alliance, Michelle Ross, told the reporter, oh, the AKA is just doing this on a turf war with industry, and it's proven by the date that they started complaining about 7-OH, thinking that it was in 2024, and that's not true. In 2018, we developed our model Kratom Consumer Protection Act that we started to send to legislators across the country in anticipation of actions being taken in 2019. In 2019, the first state to pass the Kratom Consumer Protection Act model legislation that we presented was the state of Utah. And in that bill, it says that the level of 7-OH cannot be greater than 2% of the overall fraction of the alkaloids in the product. 2019. That's not a turf war. That's a stand up for the consumer. It's raising the red flag as a warning to anybody in the future that might take a synthetically derived or chemically manipulated 7-OH product. That's what it is. And anybody that wants to protest and say anything other than that is simply blowing smoke. And people should think about what's behind that smoke. Maybe they're hitting the wacky weed, because it's not accurate and it's not the appropriate standard for a product like this. So this current status, just to encapsulate all of this, is that the DEA rule for two substances, in one case, chemically manipulated 7-OH opioids, second, looking at the metrogynine pseudodoxil and the MGM 15 and 16 products, two separate rules, both with the same outcome. They will be scheduled in at least in 30 days. There, you can look for the final Federal Register notice. There may be a little bit of delay based on input, scientific input, that's provided to the Assistant Secretary for Health at the Department of Health and Human Services. And we'll certainly be providing scientific evidence that we're aware of to help them understand what the thresholds of safety are, and any adjustments that may need to be made for the product definitions and limits in the two rules that were published in the Federal Register by the DEA can appropriately be adjusted based on the science that's provided. It is a fool's errand. It is a lie. It is another misrepresentation by the 7-OH community to lead anyone in their community to believe that they can submit a comment and that's going to make a difference. Now, I have heard from someone whom I actually like, he's in the 7-OH community, and he called me up and he said, we can do the same thing that you did in 2016. I said, I don't think so. He goes, what's different? Well, that's a great question. Number one, what's different is that the scientific understanding of natural kratom leaf products and 7-OH and the threat it provides, along with the other chemical manipulations of pseudodoxil and MGM 15 and 16, are well documented, where in 2016 there was not as firm an understanding of all of this. You had in 2016 FDA Commissioner Gottlieb making the demonstrably false claim that kratom was an opioid, simply because it actually was a partial agonist to the mu-opioid receptors. We know that that's not the criteria that should be used, nor is it an appropriate criteria to classify. But FDA Commissioner Gottlieb was bought in to what his senior policy advisors were telling him, that kratom is an opioid. And it's not. And it's been proven not. It's not legally, it's not by chemistry, and it's certainly not in terms of the utilization that people use to the kratom leaf. It doesn't have the same signature effects that the true opioids have. So the scientific understanding, which was articulated by the FDA commissioner, by the HHS secretary, and in the documents that are published in the Federal Register by the Drug Enforcement Administration, all of which say that the focus is not on natural leaf kratom products. If there was scientific evidence, for example, if there were legitimate autopsy findings and tox screens that implicated the natural kratom leaf product itself in any of the reports made by medical examiners, coroners, by medical professionals, or by families to the FDA adverse event reporting system, where they evaluate every single report, every single one, and they evaluate whether there are clusters of deaths that are associated with the use of two or more substances together, or if one substance is causing the death. And in all of that evaluation that's been done over the past 5 to 6 years with reported so-called adverse events. And all of these, by the way, include every single death that you hear talked about in state legislative hearings, in Board of Pharmacy hearings, and in local government hearings from the kratom danger awareness people. Every single one of those autopsy and medical examiner reports are in that FAERS database and subject to evaluation by the FDA. And if they were what these families are saying as proof that natural kratom leaf kills people, then you would have seen a dramatically different recommendation from the FDA. It's not true. So they have to live with that. They have to find their pathway. And I've said it over and over again, and I will repeat it here. I do not doubt the sincerity of a family member who believes what the medical examiner or coroner told them. I don't. We can't begrudge that to them. But when they choose to then go and say, hey, this is what the medical examiner coroner told me, without being willing to subject it to an independent forensics evaluation, then there's a problem. And the kratom danger awareness people publicly told all of their members, Wendy Chamberlain put up on her social media post by someone in her group, said, do not share your autopsies or tox screens, because they will just abuse it. They'll misinterpret it. We would send it to an independent forensic toxicologist. We have done it. We have seen that the examples that were provided in Idaho by a so-called kratom death were not true by independent forensic evaluations. We know the Matt Davenport law in Tennessee was not accurate, and that we can prove it that it was actually a much more complicated and death caused by other substances. And we saw that to be true in CJ's law. And the biggest one, because it's bigger only because of the efforts of the mother, who Patty Wheeler, who believes that her son died of an overdose of kratom. She reported that the medical examiner confirmed to her that her son had ingested massive amounts of metrogene immediately prior to his death, which she believes led to a seizure and his death. I get it. She believes that. When I met Patty Wheeler, she told me that. She said the medical examiner in this case had confirmed to her all of what I just told you, and that she was making a documentary which was designed only to ask for regulations on kratom products. She just wanted, and she said specifically, I do not want to take away natural kratom leaf products from anyone who believes it's helping them. That's what she said. She wanted her documentary to be informative, to be a call to action where there needed to be more focus on this, and we appreciated that. I participated in her documentary. Haven't had a chance to see it yet because it's not been accepted by any mainstream platform that will adopt it. But she said that the medical examiner told her all of that. When we saw the tox screen, and it says that metrogene was indeed tested positive. It had a number of other substances that tested positive as well, with an important distinction between those other drugs or substances and naturally kratom, metrogene. And that was, metrogene was non-quantifiable, and the other substances were. So it is impossible impossible for there to have been a massive amount of atropine that was consumed immediately prior to the death of Wyatt Wheeler. That's just a fact. Again, I feel great sympathy and empathy for the mother. But she stood on the floor of the Utah State Senate next to Senator Mike McKell, who, in a series of deceptive statements, introduced her and then said that she was there in order to promote the bill that, which at the time he introduced her, was a ban bill. And then when she was interviewed by a Salt Lake City newspaper reporter, he asked her directly, "Are you certain that it was Kratom that killed your son?" And she said, 100% certain because the coroner told me that. I'm sorry. The facts do not support that conclusion. Now, is it possible that the medical examiner told her exactly what she said? Of course. If the medical examiner had not yet seen the tox screen and was relying upon the statements of the mother and other people that maybe were familiar with the circumstances, making the claim that Wyatt had been ingesting huge amounts of metrogene immediately prior to his death, it would not be unreasonable for that coroner or medical examiner to have said to Patty Wheeler, "Then your son died of kratom." What is unusual is that after the tox screen was received, after it was evaluated, that any responsible medical examiner that's worth their salt could put on the death certificate that it was death caused by metrogene intoxication when it doesn't even test in a quantifiable level. So that's an example. It's one. It's tragic. These families believe it. They have every right to believe it, but we have the right, when they decide to make this a subject which has implications for public policy, we have the right to examine it. We have the right to ask a legislator, please look at this and look at what the evidence is. And if we don't have access to the autopsy or tox screen, if they are going to use it as a basis for a ban, then they should have to produce it to the legislature and get that independent test done. That should be the minimum thing that's done. And so I think that that's an important criteria. So that's where we are at this juncture. And anybody who tells you that kratom should be in the same boat and scheduled by the DEA, it would be if the FDA, evaluating every single death report it has received from every single one of the deaths that are being identified by the KDA people, it would produce the result that they want if it were true, and it's not. So that's the issue that we are contending with. I think we need to be as respectful as we can, but assertive in our right to know that there are obviously issues about the quantification of metrogene in all of these so-called deaths. So I think that that part of it is important. Let me shift away from this and just talk to you about some of the issues that we're dealing with in some of the states. Everyone knows, and by the way, you can put your Q&As up there, and I'll try to get to as many of these as I can when we get to that point in just a few minutes. The state of Ohio, we sued the Board of Pharmacy. Tomorrow, they are going to discuss the metrogene rule, which was the subject of the litigation, and we hope that the Board of Pharmacy will simply defer the natural kratom leak metrogene rule going forward. We'll see what they do. The second issue is that despite what the Board of Pharmacy did in agreeing, and there's still pending litigation that's being evaluated right now that was done by Global Kratom Coalition, and we think that the same judge, and we think the judge gets this, and so we're going to see a clarifying position on liquid products with kratom as well. So there's going to be an evaluation there. But we with the plaintiffs who have agreed to do so, will be filing a lawsuit against the Department of Agriculture because they have a separate basis upon which they claim that kratom is not legally sold in the state of Ohio. So we have work to do there, and we're going to do it. In the state of Florida, the Attorney General issued the rule that replaced the original rule. Again, something, by the way, that Madeline Sklar and her 7OH gals said wasn't going to happen. They were talking, cheering the fact that the people in Florida were going to be able to have access to these 7OH products. It would have been foreseeable by anyone anyone who understood what was happening that the Attorney General had the right, and because his passion for this issue would have led him to do exactly what I've just described, which is to initiate that second rule. We have some issues with what then happened, where the the Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services now has implemented a regulation on that they're enforcing that creates significant problems for us. So we may end up in court with them too. So there's that issue that's going on in the state of Nevada. Because of the 7OH decision by the DEA, the Board of Pharmacy has stood down from their initial work session where they voted unanimously to recommend that full scheduling of all kratom products in the state of Nevada. I had a conversation with the executive director, who seems to be a very reasonable fellow, by the way. He said that the Board of Pharmacy wants to revisit this issue in another workshop. So instead of proceeding with the original vote, based on what has happened with the DEA, they think that they might want to refine that approach, and that workshop will be held in September. So we'll keep you posted on those kinds of things. We know that the next target for us at the FDA is to get them to modify the FDA and Kratom webpage that will specifically address the safety issues with natural kratom leaf that has been affirmed both by the dose finding study and by the NIH study, which was announced that takes purified metrogenine and its potential use as a therapeutic benefit for people suffering from opioid use disorder. But the most significant takeaway from that study announcement was that in order to do it, to conduct a human clinical trial, the NIH had to get an approval by a rigorous independent examination of the safety data that could only have been approved if that institution review board, comprised of experts and scientists, were convinced that the human subjects in that trial will not be subject to an unreasonable risk of injury. So great news. And now I think that the FDA has to make their appropriate changes to the FDA and Kratom webpage. And that then will allow the California Department of Public Health, the New Mexico Board of Health, the Minnesota Department of Agriculture, and the Michigan Department of Agriculture, and other states to make appropriate revisions to their current enforcement status on kratom, which is based entirely on, and that's true in the state of Ohio too, based entirely on the FDA and Kratom webpage. So a lot of good stuff there that's happening. I think that it's pretty significant. So I'm going to now shift to the Q&A. I'm going to get through as many of these as I can, and then we can see. You're welcome to add to the Q&As if you choose. First up, Eric asked, how is Missouri doing towards regulation? Is the Attorney General going to try to ban regular kratom this upcoming session? Great question, Erica. The truth is that the Attorney General is not 100% convinced, at least prior to the FDA recommending their scheduling and having the DEA publish their scheduling, that kratom wasn't also unsafe. I think that the Attorney General, who seems to be a reasonable person, fair-minded, she has some staff people that are pretty protective, and they're trying to ban kratom, all kratom. I think that we're going to be able to win the day with science, and that should be what dictates it. So there will be legislation in the upcoming session that will regulate kratom, and we'll have to deal with how that works on the 708 side. Nick asked, how is the plan going forward with California now that AB 1088 is dead? Well, a couple things. One is that AB 1088 could be called Lazarus. It's possible it could come back. Unlikely, but possible. But certainly there has to be some action in California. I think it's only going to be triggered, or the effective thing will be triggered by a decision by the FDA to update its FDA and Kratom webpage. Adam asked, I know that you said DA can change things based on feedback, but I know a lot of people are worried about the 0.05 limit. Scientific input will decide this, not the comments of the average kratom consumer who wants to keep 7OH or not, and it's not going to be impacted by that. You will not see us at the AK advocate for comments being made to the Department of Health, Assistant Secretary of Health, unless it's scientific information, which we're going to obviously do. Rand asked, do you have any leads on states with whole leaf bans in place or states on the verge of banning will change course now. Absolutely. We've already had these discussions. We're starting to open up more. We have a meeting in Chicago at the end of this month. It's the annual summit meeting for legislators from across the country at the National Conference of State Legislatures. And we have a learning hub there. Kimberly Fletcher is going to be there. And so from Moms for America. So this is fabulous. We're going to really be pushing hard on this in order to convince these states where they have bans to actually follow what Rhode Island did, now with the stronger scientific dossier, and get states that were tipping towards banning everything, because that was sort of the cause du jour. And we're going to fight back, and we're certainly going to be working hard on those things. I know that we have some good friends in Connecticut that felt like the whole process was done incorrectly. And I think that we're in a position that we're going to see some effort there that will help. Rand says, Jeff says, thanks for what we're doing. Great, glad to do it. Taylor says, Miss Ross is saying that they accidentally banned natural kratom by putting metrogene and pseudodoxil on the list. From my understanding, MP is not naturally occurring. Should we be worried about what she is saying? First off, I would not be worried about anything Miss Ross says. She is not competent in this area, and she's proven that by the kind of bizarre things she says. I mean, she's the one that sits there and says this is a turf war, when she's the one getting paid by the companies to say that. I'm sorry. If you were an independent person saying that, maybe we could give it more credibility, but it's not a turf war. It's about whether or not the science proves these things. So on this specific issue, she's lomming on to an issue that we have already looked at, and the preamble to everything is about, from the DEA, is about synthetic derivations of this, chemically manipulations. And if there is a level of 7-OH, or if there is a level of metrogene pseudodoxil, it wasn't inadvertent, it's just simply a correction that can be made based on the science that will be provided by the Assistant Secretary for Health. And that science will have to come from legitimate scientists, not the opinion of Ms. Ross. Not my opinion. It's got to be done based on the science, and we think that we're in great shape there, particularly when the levels that they're talking about occur because they're chemically manipulated along the way. So Michael says, worried that this step one and they'll eventually ban leaf analog. Michael, you're referring to the Analog Act, and that's a interesting law that requires a multiple pronged test. And I can assure you that our legal team has evaluated this carefully, and there's no way that Natural Leaf meets that multi-pronged test that would be subject to an Analog Act review, because the DEA scheduled the levels of pseudodoxil and 7-OH. That's not going to happen. They didn't do the levels of metrogene. I understand the problem, and there's certainly not going to be any evaluation that's credible with the fact that metrogene converts into either trace amounts of 7-OH or pseudodoxil. So that we're not really going to worry about these things. Let me restate that. We will worry about them, but we're not going to be overly concerned about them, because this process, the 7-OH people is going to throw the fog and they're going to spread it as far as they can. And we need to stay the course and just follow exactly what the science says. Adam says, what exactly will the federal KCPA do? So what it will do is establish a clear direction to the FDA about how they can actually they can review kratom products, natural kratom leaf products, and allow them to be on the market. And it will be a specific regulatory framework that doesn't get complicated by all of the arguments made by the dietary supplement industry about how kratom and the DSHEA Act don't really match up very well. That's probably true, but essentially it's going to be requiring the FDA to enact specific regulations that will allow the states to understand what's safe and what's not safe in the levels of 7-OH. The naturally kratom products that are there, and what the prohibited levels of 7-OH. One thing I hope we can do, I can't say we can, I hope we can modify the possession penalty on 7-OH consumers. And I think statutorily the Congress has the authority to do it. I hope they will do it. I know when we had the discussions back in 2016 with Senator Booker's, Senator Gillibrand, Senator Wyden's office, it was all about that issue, that they didn't want to criminalize individual consumers that would lead to arrests and all the other problems associated with that. So we're going to be fighting hard if we can on that provision as well. JT asks, will Kratom leaf be harder to get or too expensive since retailers may have more issues selling it due to the 7-OH ban? Retailers will have no problem selling natural Kratom leaf. The bigger problem, I think, in the supply chain is really coming out of Indonesia, where under the pretense, and I call it advisedly, I think, in my opinion, it's a pretense of the Indonesian government to establish stricter regulatory standards on the quality and wholesomeness of the metrogene leaf products, that what they're actually doing is manipulating the supply chain in order to increase prices. So in other words, they're using their quota system there to restrict the amount that can be sold, driving up the prices because of supply and demand. I think that's anti-competitive. I don't like it. I think that the good news on the horizon here, and it's in the very near horizon, is that Thailand has established very strict quality controls and wholesomeness controls that naturally exceed FDA requirements, and they are going to increase their supply so that they can compete with Indonesia, and that will drive the prices down. That is my opinion about what the more significant problem is that's going on. Lloyd asks, is there anything else happening in South Dakota? Just that we fought back the ban bill. We got a good KCPA there. We're going to continue to work there. Cami says, please correct me if I'm wrong, but the difference between Kratom and 7-OH is this. Kratom, metrogene speciosa, partially binds to receptors in the central nervous system, while 7-OH in plain leaf is a byproduct metabolized in trace amounts by the liver. 7-OH isolate binds fully to the receptors in the brain and spinal cord, and only when it is isolated, right? Partially. So the way this works is that the body isn't able to differentiate between 7-OH that's metabolized in your body or that recurs in trace amounts when it hits your mu opioid receptors. What the receptors do recognize is how it activates them. And the activation then determines where, as a partial agonist, natural Kratom leaf is going to go. And it goes to, along with the trace amounts of 7-OH, it goes to the sector of the brain that provides a little mood elevation, probably because of 7-OH. And it has the analgesic or pain relief effects that we know are the signature of metrogene. And none of that occurs at the sector of the brain that gives you a euphoric high like 7-OH does, or it goes to your respiratory system. But the important thing about, and this is fascinating stuff as you learn the science of it, when you activate that receptor, when 7-OH does it in the normal levels of trace amounts of 7-OH, metrogene actually competes for the activation with the 7-OH, which probably accounts for why the metrogene is effective in treating pain as well. So it competes for the binding affinity to the mu opioid receptors. Fascinating stuff, and we're learning more and more about this all the time. But Cami, you're partially right. The other part that probably is not correct is that the byproduct that you're talking about, the trace amounts in the liver, is not very significant. It's not like 7-OH products that are concentrated, synthesized, and they are full-blown opioids, and they have all of the opioid activity that's signature to opioids, meaning you get the euphoric high, it goes to your respiratory system, which accounts for the adverse events that they're observing, and that they justified the scheduling recommendation. Matt, okay, you aren't being honest. Kratom has been in contention way before 7-OH. I don't know what that means. The AK was formed to protect it and advocate because the public was scared of Kratom. You should be more transparent. Kratom is also in danger. So Matt, you were wrong. You were wrong on multiple levels. And I know you've drunk the Kool-Aid, or the 7-OH as it may be, and you want this to be true, and it's not. The fact of the matter is that 7-OH did not enter the marketplace until 2021 as an isolated product. There was no competition in 2018 and 19 when we were trying to raise the red flag about the levels of 7-OH that should be in a product. And our main concern, frankly, was what we were seeing out of Indonesia. And so we wanted to make sure that there wasn't some kind of manipulation going over there. We didn't know that the trouble was on our own shores. And so, Matt, you can be a 7-OH advocate. You should go back over to the 7-OH webinar that they're holding, where they're crying towels out, and they're going to tell you to go and provide comments to HHS. because they won't listen either, by the way, because that's not the purpose of all of that. But I'm sad that you were duped. I'm sad that you believe this. But let me tell you something that's true. Kratom can only be in danger if the science demonstrates that it meets the 8 factors. You can make up whatever you want, and Miss Ross can sit there and chatter all she wants. The truth is that this is driven by a specific criteria that's embedded in the Controlled Substances Act. That's it. And you can whine all you want, but it's the science that will drive this. And the FDA, who was a strong critic of kratom, who believed that it was dangerous, now says that it's not, that it meets the criteria for safety factors, that's well tolerated at all dose levels. So peddle your nonsense somewhere else, because you're wrong. And I don't mean to be so harsh, except I've seen you on these other social media platforms, and I see that you don't care about the truth. You're only interested in espousing this propaganda and nonsense about the 7-OH products. Gary says, so is it just a dosing issue with 7-OH? The drug laws, Controlled Substances Act, is completely unconstitutional and has created a more dangerous environment for all of society. This is a simple statistical fact. If any bothers to look at the data, education regulation is the only safe way forward. Banning substances and making them illegal does nothing for the public safety. It only serves to deny people their liberty. Happy debate with anyone. So Gary, you can debate it. I don't care. Your premise is incorrect. It's foundationally unscientific. It is driven by emotion. I get it. I get the argument, by the way, that you should have the freedom to do whatever you want. So why don't we outfit everyone with a fentanyl pill and let them get down to the drug corner and buy it? Why don't we do that? Are you in favor of that, Gary? I don't think you are. I think you just want to make this false equivalency argument, and say that prohibition has never worked. I understand that argument too, which is why we're willing to say that the individual consumer should not be subject to a penalty for possession. But I'm all for, and Gary, you should be too, that the 7-OH manufacturers who are chemically manipulated and producing an opioid that is dangerous should be restricted from doing so, as should the distributors and the retailers. And Gary, if you're not in favor of that position, then you need to go back to the 7-OH community, talk to obviously to your friends over there. Rihanna says, thank you so much. There's a couple of other businesses that is really affecting as well. And I think we really need that quickly, because it seems to be getting worse. We don't know the best way to get through to officials that are against kratom in New Mexico. We're working hard to try to convince them. The threshold issue, Rihanna, is going to be getting the FDA to change the FDA and kratom webpage. Michael says, warned that this is step one and they'll eventually ban leaf in the analog. I've already answered that. It's not going to happen. They're also saying that Mitra pseudo ban affects leaf because of what we consume leaf in our body metabolism, the pseudo. Again, the focus by the DEA in their preamble language, which qualifies what they were doing, is all about the chemically manipulated levels, not the naturally occurring levels. We are going to obviously ask that the Assistant Secretary for Health look at the science on this, and I think we're going to be fine, as we have been on the trace amounts of 7-OH. Michael says, I've already answered that one. Jamie says, can you explain the natural levels of 7-OH in kratom leaf powder? Looking at my package of kratom, and it shows a number with a ppm on the end. Jamie, this is one of the challenges that we worked initially with the Attorney General in Florida about what the parts per million should be. Ultimately, there should be two things that these regulators attempt to do, and I think this applies at the FDA, the DEA, and the Attorney Generals and any other regulatory body. That is that you quantify what the safety levels are, and you determine what they are. And then the second part of this is you make them conform in an understandable way. There's no way that a consumer is going to understand what the difference between 400 parts per million and 800 parts per million are. They understand what a serving size is and how many milligrams that you might have in a product. So a serving size should be dictated by common usage that consumers understand, and leave the science behind it to the independent certificate of analyses that needs to be provided by a manufacturer prior to market entry to the regulatory bodies that supervise it. So that's clearly the way to do this. Tracy says 7OH ban is on the governor's desk to be signed by New York with the DA announcement. Will that mean that they will not be banning at the state level now, in your opinion? So great question, Tracy, because there, in some states, there is an automatic adoption of the federal standard for any substance that is scheduled. Some states don't do that. What is true, no matter what the state does, that it is a federal ban, and that if someone is apprehended in the commission of any crime or is found to be in possession, unfortunately, of 7OH after this ban, it'll be a federal offense, chargeable, and the states are going to have to catch up. And so part of our focus in next year's legislative sessions will be in those states where there needs to be an affirmation of the federal scheduling of 7OH and MGM 1516 and Suboxone, that we do it, and that for those states that automatically adopt it, that we do what we can to put enforcement mechanisms in place, because without enforcement, it really doesn't mean anything. So we're thinking that the governor will likely sign that. Michael asked, is there a scientific process to reliably extract and concentrate metrogene only in the way that amplifies the effects? Would the AK support this? I don't know the answer to that question. I'm sure that any creative chemists can do whatever they want. Here's what our position is on the concentration of a kratom extract. The only solvents that should be used to extract a metrogene natural leaf product is FDA-approved food-grade solvents, which limit the potency of the finished product. Some of those extracts, by the way, reduce the amount of metrogenine in the product. So that's the only standard that we're going to adopt, and we will only support that, and we will not support a creative scientific process that extracts concentrated metrogenine, because we've reported over 130 companies to the FDA that have done just that, or at least have concentrated them using unapproved solvents. And we think that those, both the marketing and the formulations, are wrong and shouldn't do that. I've just answered whether we think manipulation is wrong. We do. I realize there are some products in the market that attempt this already, but without regulation. And thank you for your support of natural kratom and the scheduling. So, Michael, I think I've answered the questions. We're not going to, it's not a free-for-all. It's not the Wild West. Got to be formulated correctly. Rachel says, are you saying contacting our state, Michigan, Ohio, is not beneficial anymore because they only want scientific evidence? What I was saying, Rachel, and I'll clarify this in case I missed it, there's no need to comment on the Department of Health and Human Services Assistant Secretary for Health asking for public comment on what the levels should be in the 2 rules that were proposed by the DEA. That's it. In terms of contacting people at the Board of Pharmacy or the Department of Agriculture or the legislature in Ohio, Michigan, absolutely do it. In Michigan, by the way, you had Speaker Hall, who stood up and made his case with Patty Wheeler, with him, next to him, in this impassioned plea to ban kratom. And they passed a ban. The speaker ramrodded that through. The Senate did not see it that way. And in the end, Speaker Hall made a big deal and said, this is my #1 priority on the budget, and tried to use the kratom ban issue as a lever to get the budget, as a way of holding up the budget, and that ultimately failed. So we will continue to alert consumers about the advocacy efforts where we need help. I know sometimes it can be fatiguing, but we need your help, and so please respond when you can. Crystal says that for Ohio, the Board of Pharmacy website indicates natural kratom in its vegetative form, i.e. dried leaf or powdered, is legal to sell and possess. How is this related to what you're saying about some sort of rules? So the Board of Pharmacy in Ohio has issued a rule on an emergency rule, which is in effect banning 7OH products. They also issued a metrogenine rule, but when they did the 7OH rule, they included trace amounts of 7OH. They excluded trace amounts, so any 7OH product that had, kratom that had 7OH in it was going to be banned. So that's why we sued them. We got an agreement that that's not their plan, that trace amounts are okay. We're also working with them now on what the definition of a extract will be, because they, of course, do not, in a properly extracted form, do not exceed those levels either. So the rules that they're they're now doing tomorrow will be the natural kratom leaf rule, and we're going to see what they decide to do. We think they're going to abandon it, but we'll see, because right now the 7OH rule has been in effect for several months. So Lori says, how did the special meeting in Georgia go? Anything new there? Go on and watch it. You had Chairman Townsend, who stacked the deck against us. I think if you were going to weigh the number of witnesses for and against, it would be easily 10-3, with three of us not getting much say. But we made our point, and it was interesting to see Andrew Kolodny, who is a so-called expert on kratom, who has carried over his crusade against opioid prescriptions for pain patients at the federal level, responsible in large measure for the restrictions on prescription opioid medications prescribed by a doctor, supervised by a medical professional to pain patients, all because he was working with the Suboxone industry. It's shameful. And now here he is in the kratom space, because all of that business is dried up. And stay tuned. Lots of information on Andrew Kolodny. But Chairman Townsend brought him in because obviously he's anti-kratom. And you know, we obviously have a lot more to do. He did promise me, Chairman Townsend promised me, that while he did not allow me to testify, that he will welcome me at the next meeting. And he's bringing in by his description, a very tough anti-kratom person that can also testify. So we'll look forward to that. Maybe he was talking about Dean Francis, you think? That would be something. But overall, I think the meeting went well. I think we pushed them to a draw. They didn't get what they wanted. And now I think there were some great questions asked by some of the members of the committee, by the way. So I don't think that Chairman Townsend got what he wanted either. So more to come on that. They say there will be 3 or 4 more hearings before they're done. So we'll see. Camille asked, was a kratom ban included in North Carolina hemp bill? No, it was not. There's still work to do. They're going to reconvene at the end of the month, and we're going to be in there slugging with them. But right now, it's not included. Madison asked, what can we do in Kansas? We're going to be back in there next year, and we're going to use the scheduling of 7OH to be a trigger for there being a revisiting of that law. Nor asked, after 7OH gets scheduled, what would be the process to get the California Department of Public Health to stop going after natural kratom leaf products? Well, I answered that earlier. It's about the website, the FDA and kratom website. That's where we need to focus, and we're going to get that. Chris asked, is it possible kratom liquid products will be legal in Ohio? Yes, it will be. If so, how long do you think it will be? I think that there's an argument to be made that they're already legal if they're safely formulated and under the standards. But to the extent there's a question, this is going to be resolved by the current litigation that's ongoing, and I've seen the agreed order that has been proposed, and it will cover liquid products and obviously the actual extracts. Then Dylan thanks us. Do you expect the Michigan ban proposal to be brought to the Senate? I've already answered that's done. They're done for the year, and Speaker Hall can bring it back next year. But he's going to meet some people at the doorstep that he refused to listen to. He would not even meet with us. Yet he'll meet with Patty Wheeler. But we're going to bring science, and we're going to bring a very aggressive lobbying campaign to expose why he was wrong in what he did, and hopefully he'll be accountable for that. The second question, if the FDA did delay the 30-day timetable, would it be for a small period of time, or could it be delayed for the long term? It's possible it could be delayed for months. I don't think that's going to happen. This has already been cooked. It's a minor technical change, if any, and then I think they'll implement it very quickly. There might not be any delay going forward. It'll just be a day or two at the least. But I'm not worried about that right now until we hear more, and certainly those discussions are ongoing now. Melanie asked, is anything going on in Texas and in the AG 7OH lawsuits? Happy we're still good there. We are good there, and we're going to continue to work with the Texas authorities. We've got some good news coming out in Texas that will give us good scientific evidence that will help us against Senator Perry down there, who continues to try to promote a ban. But I think the 7OH issue helps us dramatically down there. So we'll keep fighting there. Harry says, what state, in your opinion, is headed in the right direction with legislation? I'm going to tell you the truth. I get so immersed in all of these various states. And we are now operating with lobbying teams in nearly 30 states. And I catch myself, I have to say, whoa, I think I made a mistake on that one. But to answer your question, I think that we're going to make progress in Delaware. We got the age ban in the age limit, and they want to study whether they have the testing capability. I think we're going to be able to do well in Delaware. I think that Pennsylvania is headed in the right direction. I believe that we're going to be able to reverse Wisconsin and Vermont now that the 7-OH ban has come out. I think that we have a shot at both Arkansas and Alabama, and it's complicated, but I think we're going to make some progress there. I think we'll be able to overturn the Kansas ban. I don't know about Tennessee, but we're going to give it our best. So we're going to work there. Louisiana is a horrible situation, but they based it on a claim by the House sponsor, Representative Leo, who said that there's no such thing as synthetic. I think that she's got to be pretty embarrassed right now. So maybe we can revisit that. I think we're going to revisit Utah. Senator Mike McKell, who became the anti-kratom nemesis that he was, he's wrong. And then you guys all heard me. I don't want to get off on that tangent because we don't have enough time, but I think we're going to do well in coming back in Utah. I think we'll do well in Nevada with a stronger bill to enforce it. And I think I'm confident we're going to do well in Washington, although that's a highly regulatory state and we may not like exactly the regulatory scheme, but I think we'll get at least something there done. So that we'll work on that. And I'm not sure I answered your question completely, but like I say, I'm immersed in all these states. And Florida, I hope we do well in Florida. And I think Georgia, we're going to do well. David asked, when was this order actually submitted to the registrar? It's the Federal Register. It was done on Monday the 6th. So it's 30 days from then. And then the DA will decide whether to accept any input to change it and then publish it. That's it. I mean, they're not going to go another 30 days. They've already done that. So it'd just be a tweak if anything. I've answered Michigan. It's dead for the year, this legislative session. Byron asked if Kansas have a new ruling on this kratom prohibition law. We're going to have to wait for the legislature, but I'm optimistic. Michael says we're worried about the next administration having a different view on the whole leaf. I agree. Every single change in administration brings with it issues like this. So Michael's raised a great point that we can't sit on our laurels and think that we've solved this problem. We have not, but we need to be diligent. And the bottom line is science is what dictates these federal policies. And that's what will protect us because we've already seen the science on natural kratom leaf products. We have seen the science on these dangerous synthetic chemically manipulated 7-OH opioids. So that's what will be the distinguishing factor. Adam asked, will companies be required to have an NDI? So if you're talking about a new dietary ingredient notification under the federal KCPA, no. If that's what you're asking, we're going to have a pathway that allows for the regulation of kratom, all kratom products in different categories for extracts versus naturally kratom products. Taylor asked, in Georgia, are MGM-15 and other pseudo kratom products already banned in the state of Georgia if they're being considered synthetic? Yes. The problem is, and it took the utter gall of Chairman Townsend to sit and say in the hearing that the problem was the lack of enforcement. He said it. I almost fell off my chair. It was Rick Townsend who, in the course of his bill, which he initiated, that was critical of the first KCPA because of its lack of enforcement, he was right, stood at the Senate Health Committee, was asked the question by his modified bill as to who's going to enforce this. And he stood there dumbfounded. And it took Matt Wetherington to walk up and whisper in his ear. And there's a famous picture of him putting his hand over his mouth and whispering to Chairman Townsend the answer. And the answer was the weakest of answers imaginable. Oh, local law enforcement will do that. How in the world can a local law enforcement officer in the state of Georgia walk into a convenience store, see a 7-OH product, and know what it is, other than by the name, right? There needed to be an enforcement agency, and we fought for that. And it was Rick Townsend who defeated it because he wanted to ban kratom because that's what Matt Wetherington, the trial attorney, told him to do. He is the representative of the Matt Wetherington law firm. Now I know he represents some region out in the eastern part of Georgia, but they should forget about that because he really represents the trial attorneys when it comes to kratom. Got my blood pressure up. Those products are already banned, and it's easy. Turn them into the AG, and I think you'll see enforcement action. David asked, and to add to that, does federal supersede current 708 bans in these few states, Florida, or will those become moot? Some states, as I mentioned earlier, automatically accept the federal standard on any scheduling. Other states have to affirm them, but they're always federally illegal, and the states can add to it. There'll be a state provision as well. So Nicholas asked about Kansas. I've already answered that. We're going to be back in there fighting hard. Glenn asked with regard to the FDA Kratom webpage, he had wrote the FDA regarding his personal story, which is deeply compelling, and asked why it hasn't been changed. They sent him a beautiful reply from the head pharmacist. She also said they didn't have enough evidence to say it's safe for the liver and so on. And I think that there's good scientific evidence, despite what their career staff are now saying, that's going to be the driver for this change. But Glenn, thank you for writing the FDA. Thank you for your continued efforts in advocating for it. Very significant. Kenneth says you're more than willing to state your opinion when you are stating science. I try to make the difference. I think science dictates, and I can have an opinion about something, but it's like the law. I can have an opinion about the law, but the way it is. Teresa says, how would you describe the scientific difference between the two and to a kindergartner? You've lost me on your explanation. The difference between 7-OH is that it's very dangerous, and natural kratom leaf is not. That's the difference with kindergartner. But no kindergartner should be exposed to kratom. It's not responsible. So what I would say to my teenagers, and I have grandkids who are teenagers, and they've asked me about kratom, and I've told them that it's important to use kratom responsibly, and you have to have an intended use for it, and it has to be something that's legitimate. So I think that that's the difference. But bottom line is the science proves that natural kratom leaf product is safe and well tolerated at all those levels when responsibly formulated and properly labeled, age-gated. And 7-OH is a full-blown, chemically manipulated, deliberately engineered opioid. It is like an opioid. In every characteristic, it's dangerous. Alex, when I'm heartened to focus on science to advance the AK's position to governments, I'm also keenly aware of this government's general disregard for science overall. What are some of the PR strategies that we use to advance the position of protecting responsible kratom use by adult consumers? This is, Alex, this is about hand-to-hand combat. I tell people all the time something that my father-in-law told me before he passed away, and he was a World War II veteran. He said, he gave me advice. He said, when you get into battle, he said, pick the kind of warriors you want in your foxhole. And that's really the challenge for us, to make sure that we have people that are committed to the same things that we're committed to. Good science, safely formulated products, properly labeled, and age-gated. And I think that's the important thing. So we're going to continue. There are companies and other groups that are involved heavily in this space. We appreciate their help, their support for their advocacy. They're fantastic in promoting this. We have used PR firms. We try to employ good, legitimate strategies in communicating our messages. We're not going to lie to people. We're not going to buffalo people. Even though they might think we are, we're not. We rely on the science. And the difference is between me telling you that the science backed by NIH and the FDA, by HHS, says this, and Michelle Ross at 7 Hope Alliance say, oh, well, wait a minute, now they're the same thing, when scientifically they're not. And for her to suggest that is crazy. For her to say that 7-OH and kratom are the same because the liver creates 7-OH, and then to act like it's 7-OH products. It's not true. So I think that's the distinction. You have to stand there and you have to evaluate it. Does it sound reasonable to you, what Michelle Ross is saying, or what Madeline Sklar is saying, or whoever, versus a reliance upon the baseline of science? And And I guess the greatest question in the world is for the 708ers entirely, where is your science? Because Vince Sanders already answered that question definitively. We don't have any. It's just we use our consumers as human guinea pigs. And we hope to God they don't drop dead. That's his answer. So people can view that for what it's worth. And I don't mean to be so harsh on Madeline. I am a little tough on Michelle Ross, but I intend that because she just says things that are odd, goofy, beyond belief in terms of science. I think Madeline is well-intentioned, and I think her heart's in the right place. I think she's just been caught up in this nonsense. Gary says the Controlled Substances Act has ignored the criteria for psychedelics from the jump. I'm not saying that the Controlled Substances Act is perfect, nor am I saying that the method by which you can recommend scheduling is perfect. I agree that there needs to be a more a closer look, a more extensive look at the science with respect to psychedelics. And I can tell from Jack Bergman, who is a great champion for Kratom, is a great champion for psychedelic products to be used for veterans suffering from PTSD. I respect that. And I think that while we work within the restrictions that are provided by the laws, we can also find pathways to legitimately revise those laws to accommodate these kinds of things in the marketplace. Taylor says, any advice for consumers or retailers to guard against sales of possible synthetic 7-OH products that are marketed simply as alkaloids or pseudo-kratom? Any way to identify products packaging mask as something more dangerous? First off, look at the labels. I think it's pretty easy to say that it's a 7-OH product when it says it's pseudo on the product or it's perks or whatever. But look at the label and then require, if you're a retailer, I wouldn't sell any of these products unless I got from the manufacturer or the distributor a certificate of analysis that shows it, because we've tested some of these so-called 7-OH products at an independent lab, and we found that some of them don't have 7-OH at all. They're all pseudo, or they have far greater levels of 7-OH in them than they say. Vince Sanders had to answer this very question when he said it was 7.5 milligrams, and the true content of his 7.5 milligram per tablet was 28.5 milligrams. Do the math on that. And he's, it was just a minor problem. It ain't a minor problem. It's a huge problem, and particularly now that we see it in perspective. Gary says, I'm for making society safe while preserving individual liberty. Those are tough things. I understand the sentiment. Don't understand how you get there if you don't allow for someone to be the gatekeeper on safety. Nikki says, is the framework for regulations going to be the power of the federal, state, or both governments? It's going to be both. Apologies if this already answered a lot of issues connecting. Asking, as Michigan has had a full framework to regulate by way of LAR, which is a regulatory agency, and the Michigan government threw it out, rewrote the whole bill to criminalize. Right now in Michigan, it's cleared. We have a battle ahead of us in the next session. There is no kratom regulation in the state of Michigan. JT, how will the DA determine if plain leaf is below the acceptable limit of 7-OH? This is all testing, and the burden will be on the manufacturer to make sure that their products are compliant when they enter the marketplace. Otherwise, they subject everyone in that supply chain to a felony conviction. John asked about Michigan. I've answered that. Eugene says, thanks for everything your staff are doing. Hey, the AK staff is fabulous. I have the privilege of working with them. I can tell you that Stephanie and Taylor and the others, they're fabulous people, and they are working hard for you. So thank you for the shout out. And thanks for shouting out from Kentucky and Indiana. We got to fix those states, obviously. Taylor says, any advice on consumers, retailers to guard against sales of possible synthetic? I just answered that. Just check it. Make sure you get a certificate analysis. Nick says, what's the timeline on the federal KCPA? We're gonna file it here pretty quickly now that the 7-OH thing is done, but it's going to take some time to get it passed. There's always vehicles that are available that, depending on the right circumstances, the right support, you can attach your bill to. But I would look to next year for that federal KCPA. Taylor says, is there a list of specific products that might be deemed illegal or which AK has reported to the FDA so we can avoid them in the market? It's hard to keep up with this. We have a list of products that we have tested on the market that they now are all banned, the 7-OH ones. But The more important thing that I would look at, not specific products because we don't advocate for those, I would look at the list of companies that agree to be independently audited for good manufacturing practices, because the quality of the products are embedded in the manufacturing process. Then I would look at, for each individual product, and you need to do this on your own, to look at what's in that product and test it out. Be careful, because some people that just they're bad actors and they're going to fake it. So just do the best you can. So Brian says, bottom line, how long until 708 is off the market, taken out of my local smoke shops in South Carolina? That's coming with it. You got to say that the reason there's a 30-day period that is embedded in the in the Controlled Substances Act is that's the time period that the retailers clear their shelves. If they're not smart enough to clear their shelves, then it'll be shortly thereafter, because all you have to do is pick up the phone, call the DEA and say, I got a smoke shop selling in South Carolina and they're selling an illegal product. And I think you're going to see a bad day for that smoke shop. Tyler says, can we just ban that Andrew guy? It's about science. He's entitled to his opinion. He gets way out of his lane when he starts talking about kratom. And I'll give you an example. He stood before the Suffolk County legislature and he started talking about the import alert, which he has no qualifications to do. And so he's way out of his lane on that. But then he proceeded to tell him, he said, I'm not an expert there. Then he told him what he thought was true, and it's not. He's wrong. But more importantly, he told me personally, and he's told others who corroborated the same thing, that every patient he's seeing since he went back into the practice of treating patients has come in with a kratom addiction. That's what he says. When he was testifying before the Suffolk County legislature, he revealed what he didn't say, and that is that his practice is restrained into consults that he's asked to come in on, and he markets himself as the kratom guy. And so when someone gets admitted to the hospital and a doctor says, what's your problem? And says, I'm addicted to kratom, then they call in Andrew Kolodny. And he comes in as the chief Moomba and says, oh, I'm here to evaluate you. Oh, it's for kratom. Well, no wonder all of his patients are now kratom. This is craziness. And you think about how that would be evaluated by any standard. I don't even understand it. And yet he says it with a straight face. So I don't know. But we're not going to ban Andrew. We're going to provide information that will allow for those who are dealing with him, listening to him, and hearing his testimony to put it in the right perspective. Taylor says, how should retailers and wholesalers determine what products to pull? There's uncertainty on products. If you have anything that has 7-OH on the back panel, or 7-OH on the front, or Sunodoxil, or the MTM 1516, get rid of them. Send them back, get reimbursed for them. I'm not going to repeat these nice things people say. My goodness. Any idea on what 7-Hope did in Delaware? They were out there arguing that they ban them both or regulate them both, and we obviously have to fight for that. Gary asked, what is the situation in Arizona? Our sponsor of a strengthened KCPA bill pulled the bill because one of the senators who is anti-kratom was going to make a motion to ban everything. So we pulled the bill, not even take the risk. And we're now working with the Attorney General's office to make sure that the next legislature will have the right levels in Arizona for 7-OH to be banned, and then have the kratom leaf protected. Madison, do we have a good chance in Kansas to reverse the ban? I think we do, but hope springs eternal. Never know. Certainly we're going to give it our best effort. Michelle asked me to send me your email address. This is not hard. mhatto@americankratom.org. You now have it. The secret's out. So Michelle, please email me. And I would be, she's going to recommend something for my tooth replacement. I got a temporary right here, and they're ready to put the implant in. So love to hear from you. Thank you, Michelle, for any help I can get. Obviously, I'm an old guy and I'm falling apart and I need the help. Stephen says, are we concerned about vindictive 7-OH advocates trying to get kratom banned out of spite, or they're believing the warped argument that the products are the same some of their spokespeople have said? Of course. And now we've got to Stephen, the right messaging now is science. Not my opinion, not the opinion of Michelle Ross or Vince Sanders or anyone else in the 708 community. It's about science, and we're going to rely on that and push as hard as we can. Misty says, is kratom considered a precursor to 708 under the precursor laws? This is the Analog Act. I've answered that, Misty, but no, it's a multi-pronged test, and we don't meet that test. And so I think we'll be safe. I'm not saying that you can't file litigation, and maybe the 708 people will try that, but it doesn't mean they'll be successful because it all comes down to the science. And congratulations on your daughter's birthday dinner. Cami says, could the AK get lawyers to enforce a deeper investigation concerning autopsy reports, results, or requests to view? These are driven by state laws. We ask for every report that we get of a death, and depending on the state, we can get them or we can't. And so we're in a battle right now in Illinois where the state law doesn't protect these autopsies, but we've got a couple local coroners who are protecting them, and we think illegally so. So we are engaged in battles at these local levels. We are trying to get every single autopsy we can where the designation is made by the medical examiner that this was a kratom death. We're going to do everything we can in order to get that done. Angela asked, thank you for the reference beside the HHS site. Where also can we see that the FDA is shifting its take on natural kratom? What else do we know to support the FDA could be changing the wording soon? Well, you look at the DEA's scheduling notice where they acknowledge that natural kratom leaf product is not subject to this ban. Look at the HHS and FDA press release saying that natural kratom leaf is not subject to it. And we're waiting for the FDA and kratom webpage to catch up to that. Adam says, do I think that manufacturers are just going to come out with new replacement products? Yes, of course they will. They'll tweak it. They're profiteers. It's going to be whack-a-mole for a while, but they'll never be able to capture the marketplace the way they did by deceiving people and saying, this is naturally kratom. We're going to be standing at the gate, making sure that doesn't happen. Carol asked, are kratom products legally required to list 708 quantities, even trace quantities on their supplement facts? Yes, they have to list whether the actual quantity or if it's undetectable, they have to say less than certain, whatever the quantifiable level is. Might be 0.3% or something like that. And you absolutely, he asked, should we advise people to toss a product because 708 is listed on the back? You can go try to get a refund, but you're not going to get that. Toss it. It's an illegal product. It's a dangerous product. So Taylor says, I saw some people threatening to make 708 at home from legal kratom to flood the black market after this ban takes effect in hopes to drag kratom down with it. Do you think that would be a real threat or just internet talk? I got myself in trouble when I said in an interview with the Tampa Bay Times, I think it was, where I made the point when the similar kind of question was asked, well, what if, and hypothetical was offered. And I said at the time that you can't legislate stupid. Now, it wasn't my best moment because the critics glommed onto that and have mocked me for saying it. And I'll restate it. You can't legislate the misbehavior or the lack of common sense by people. And so do I think that people will try to make 708 at home and then flood the black market calling it kratom? Yes, that's possible. But we're going to be alert to it. Hopefully it's just going to be just internet talk because they'll move on to something else. And let them do that rather than what we're doing here, trying to fight this battle. But I think it's a real problem. Adam says, do you recommend nutritional facts or supplement facts for kratom? I know there isn't a perfect answer. There's not. And that's why you have to consult your attorney because I can't give you legal advice, and that's a legal question. But thanks for asking. It is a complicated answer. Rob says, since 708 can be made from leaf, does that pose a risk down the road for us? There are virtually any number of products that can be made from the natural kratom leaf plant or natural cocoa plants or natural coffee plants. This is just what happens. And the real restraint is going to be on the risk factor that a manufacturer or distributor takes. And now that we've clearly defined what natural kratom leaf is as opposed to synthetically derived ones. So I think we just have to be alert, be vigilant in doing it. And it is a risk, but we'll have to continue to confront it. Brian says, clarify the listing of 708 parts per million content for natural kratom leaf products and extracts in Florida. So under the new law or rule, it went to 1,000 parts per million. But we need to do some work on that rule, and we're in discussions right now, as you know, Brian. So let's over the next couple of days talk about this in the context of the litigation that we're preparing, and probably we have to file there in Florida to get clarity on this. But complicated issue. But right now, I'm pretty sure they went to 1,000 parts per million. But we'll talk about that. Anyway, that's it. I think that's all the questions. Let me just close the loop here. A couple of important things. Remember, September 13th to 15th, as many people as we can get there. It's going to be a fabulous event. It's going to be a celebration of a 10th year anniversary of what we did, the miracle that happened in D.C. It's going to be focused on substantive meetings with the executive branch agencies and the Congress. So we need you there. We want to have everybody engaged in this process over the next 30 days. Stay tuned for any advice we give in terms of what may be required for us to do. We still got some states in play, but support us in any way you can. If you're in the Chicago area, maybe you could come to the NCSL Learning Hub thing, talk to us, and we'll see if we can get you in for that. we are committed to continuing and pursuing this journey that we started that 10 years ago, and that is to protect consumer access to responsibly used, safely formulated, properly labeled, and age-gated products. And that's the goal. We are going to do everything we can in order to protect your access to those safely formulated products. So thanks to everyone. We hope you had a great 4th. Go look at the endcravingmisinformation.org. I've been doing a series of videos. If you haven't seen them, you need to watch them. They're filled with a lot of, I think, good information. The most recent one I did talked about the mistakes that were made by medical examiners and coroners starting in 2009 with the forensic pathologist in Sweden and continuing all the way to today, where you get mistakes that are made by these medical professionals. And I highlight all that. That would be great for you in terms of being able to follow on in discussions that you might have with these local officials. The AKA is absolutely committed to protecting consumer access. And if you get a chance, you need to give a shout out to Stephanie Taylor, to the staff. It's staylor at americancratom.org, and thank her. And she can pass on the thanks to the rest of the staff, because we have a small but very dedicated staff to doing everything we can in order to protect you and the naturally products being available in the marketplace. So thanks, everyone. Thanks for being here. This will be posted, assuming that it got recorded properly, and you'll